Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. I know I said on the last one that there might be some changes when I come back this time, but for just this week, I'm leaving everything the same as it always was. There are still going to be changes. I'm being so careful not to make the wrong move, and I especially just don't want to piss everybody off. So at least this week is still just going to be the same as always. Probably going to be a change by next week. I'll try to get everything figured out. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. Let's jump into the Q&As. First up, over on Floatplane, IB Bangin says their PVM has a digital RGB input. From what they've read so far, this is mostly for old 80s era PCs. Other than that, is there anything as far as a retro console that would work with this input? It's just kind of sitting there and I have no idea. So you'd have to send me a picture of what you're talking about. Some RGB monitors over the years have had different inputs. One's labeled like VTR, some are SDI, and it really just depends. If the question is, hey, there's an extra input, could I take advantage of it? I would assume no, especially if it already has RGB inputs and your setup is already working well. It might actually just be more of a pain to use those, especially if it turns out to be SDI, because I have had a lot of trouble with SDI in 480i resolution. It doesn't accept 240p, it doesn't accept 480p, only 480i, and even consoles that output that sometimes don't work right, sometimes there's issues. So generally speaking, I've pretty much stuck to just the RGB or component video inputs. And occasionally I would test 720p HD SDI, but I couldn't really see a difference as long as shielded cables were used. I think I did a test once and thought it was a little clearer and then realized I was using cables from the bottom of a box that I've had for years. So if you could post a picture of the cable, I'd be able to answer a little bit better. And also, it looks like you've got all of your sync and RGB cables worked out. So really glad to hear it, and thanks very much for the kind words. Captain Compost said they have a Sega CD that's always felt kind of loose. And in one of my recent videos, I mentioned that Sega CDs are notorious for leaky caps, so I decided to take mine apart. That's when I discovered why it was loose. There were no screws holding the housing on. So I know someone has been inside it before. My visual inspection of the caps turned up nothing. They looked fine. Also, they are Rubicons. So there's two questions. Is it possible that you're looking at a recapped Sega CD? Since I know the cap brand is good and it passed my visual inspection, can I forego recapping? So this is just wild speculation here, but if somebody was able to do a recap good enough that you can't tell the difference between stock, but then they didn't put any screws back in, I would be very wary of that. So I think somebody was in there for something else, and you just happened to get a good one with good caps. The only problem with that is, I think I showed this before on, I think, one of the weekly roundups when I was going through the whole, like, how to refurbish a console type of thing. I've seen many, and Jose on his Twitter feed has posted many times where he would remove a cap that looked fine, and under the cap you could see it just start to leak. So, the Sega CD is a pain. It's especially certain ones, if you like, very often what I'll do to desolder caps is I'll take the desoldering gun and I'll stick it underneath the part of the capacitor pin that's still sort of sticking up. I'll wait for it to heat up and I'll use the hot gun to kind of bend it straight, and then I'll pull the trigger and get the solder out. In doing so, in recapping a Sega CD2, I slipped and scraped the desoldering gun across the bottom of the motherboard. But when I say scraped, I mean I felt like it was no more pressure than scraping a nail over it, yet I somehow broke a whole bunch of traces on mine. So, there's two sides to this. There's, sometimes I would always say, like, a Super Nintendo, there's like 7 caps on that. If you have the slightest bit of a hesitation, just recap the thing. But with the Sega CD, I don't know, maybe leave well enough alone, but open it up again in another 6 months or so just to double check. Also, Coastriker is Coastrizer. I keep saying it wrong. It's one of my favorite dark beers. My German father-in-law always has a case in his pantry. It's pronounced almost like Kurstreitzer. Oh, see? Pronunciation right there. I really like Erdinger Dunkel. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, which is actually a dark wheat beer. They have it at Total Wine and Bevmo in my area on the West Coast. So I actually got this from Total Wine on the East Coast. They have everything. I've had the Dunkels. I love them. And I still love the Kurstreitzer. I got to get that right one of these days. My German friends have always made fun of me for their pronunciations. I used to call it Ramstein instead of Rammstein. So like I'm terrible at this stuff. It's funny when I posted that on Twitter, the first bunch of responses, as always with a Twitter post, are like, "Oh, cool," followed by a whole bunch of "That's crap beer. You have crap taste in beer. You're stupid." And it's like, but I like it. So I don't really care what you say about it. And of course, there was also a whole bunch of really awesome recommendations, exactly like yours. Like, hey, if you like that, try this. But, I bought a case of it and then I saved 1 6-pack. And I just had that the other day. And it was still just as good as I always remember it. So no rose-colored glasses here. Whether it's considered good beer or not, I love it. It's now one of my favorites. It's right up there with Smithwick's, Negro Modelo. And, I always say Guinness, but I don't feel like Guinness is a quote-unquote dark beer. It's Guinness. It has its own very specific taste to it. So, yeah, but still, all of those. So thanks for the recommendation. I'm pretty sure I've tried it, but the next time I'm at Total Wine, I'm going to grab the Dunkel just to check. Andrew C. looks like they have something to say about alcohol as well, which I didn't do this on purpose, but that's pretty funny. One right into the other. But when I talked about whiskey, it reminded Andrew of one of his favorites, New Holland Beer Barrel Bourbon. They think they recall talking about enjoying Dragon's Milk. Yeah, loved that one. The New Holland Oak Aged Stout. And this bourbon's made by the same people, but it's finished in Dragon's Milk barrels, so it tastes like both bourbon and their awesome stout. All right. The moment I'm done recording this segment, I'm jumping on Total Wine's website and seeing if I could pick it up. Me and AJ, the guitarist from Answer Infinity, we both love stuff like this, and even if it doesn't turn out to be our favorite, I'm positive we'll enjoy trying it. So thank you very much for the recommendations. I'm definitely checking this out. Cam says, thanks for covering how to flash a time sleuth. I actually didn't realize that my comments had gone through until I was watching this week's video. When I was attempting to post them, neither appeared, and I tried to submit them multiple times on both my phone and PC. I reached out to Patreon, and they said that my account had been flagged for spam? No idea why. I've got fewer than 20 comments total across all current and previous creators I support. Apparently, customer service fixed it and put both my comments up. Weird. Cam, thank you for telling me that. I swear I have never flagged anybody's comment for spam in any support service ever. In fact, I don't even really flag for spam on YouTube unless it's very obvious, like, send me $1,000 in Bitcoin and I'll send you 2,000 back type of crap. I usually just mute trolls and I don't even go through the whole spam process. So that's insane. Obviously, they're just having tech issues and they probably don't have a staff to cover it, with people working from home, but I appreciate you letting me know, but that's a little scary. I wonder if all the people that have contacted me are getting flagged for spam by accident. And in fact, let me even click here. Can I even do that? No, my only choices here are to delete, to like, or to respond. So I wouldn't even know how to... That's messed up. I'm very sorry that anybody has to deal with that crap. That sucks. Anyway, you do have questions. As an aside, Castlemania Games just shipped out some time sleuths programmed to only output 1080p. They've offered to reprogram them, but I've ordered a USB blaster and will be doing it myself. And then the follow-up was the USB blaster arrived today, and after messing around with it for a while, I downloaded Cordis and got it flashed. The process isn't very intuitive, but at least I got it done. Some instructions on the site or a short video would definitely be helpful for others wanting to change their firmware. So that's a good idea. I'll get around to doing that soon. Maybe I'll do what I've always want to do in a perfect world, which doesn't exist, is I always want to do a video and a written post. And I did that with a video capture section, but that was why that took like over 100 hours to do. So I would love to do a written post about programming the Time Sleuth and a video to help, promote and help each other. And also just some people, like, I feel like I learn much faster by reading and looking at pictures and going at my own pace. And other people feel like they learn a lot faster watching somebody else do it. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way. So I would love to do both. It's only a matter of time. So if I spend, 5 hours getting it all done on a written, and then do I really want to jump in immediately to 8 hours doing a video when I go to write posts, administer a website, work on all the crap that I do, help devs. So I'm trying, but in a perfect world, I would have enough time to do all that. So thanks for the suggestion. I'm going to add that to my to-do list right now. Next, Obed Samuel said, thanks for the advice on the Japanese VAO Mega Drive. I decided to leave it stock, although we'll give it a cap replacement and lift the subcarrier pin on the VDP. Awesome. I think that's a really great solution for that one. I also have a PAL SNES one chip 02. I've been looking for the elusive 03 for around 2 years, and I'm now convinced the 03 was never released in PAL regions. After all, we didn't get the SNES Mini or Junior here either. Just wondering if you had ever heard of anyone owning a PAL 03 or had come across one yourself. If anyone could shed some light, that would be great. I don't want to be searching for something that doesn't exist. So 2 things. I've never heard of one, but I can't say for sure if it exists or not. However, why are you looking for the 03? Is it simply for collector's item purposes? And if that's the case, awesome. Keep hunting as long as it exists. I don't think it does. But I think I proved pretty definitively that the difference between the one chip 01, 02, and 03, if you do an RGB bypass, they're all pretty much identical. I did see a couple of times random ones. So one was an 01 and one was an 02. Just look phenomenal. And I'm pretty sure the reason is when these companies made these consoles, they used 5, 10, and 20% tolerance components. So that means if something was supposed to be 100, it could swing that one component that's supposed to be 100 could swing as low as 80 or as high as 120. These are just arbitrary numbers, but so I just think that sometimes you'll probably run into one that looks better than the others for that reason. And, maybe upkeep, how much use has been on them, whatever. If you wanted to go crazy, you could replace every single surface mount component with higher quality ones. But I don't think you would even notice. And at that point, if you did notice any difference, you'd notice more of a difference switching to an FPGA solution that outputs straight HDMI. You definitely wouldn't notice a difference even on a high-end BVM. So just want to make sure I always am chasing the clearest signal, even on analog, but I just always want to keep realistic expectations. So if you're looking for the 03 because you think it's going to be an upgrade, I would definitely recommend just doing an RGB bypass and, maybe a recap with the basic caps just to be safe on yours. And that's pretty much it. I don't think you're going to be able to squeeze any realistic, better quality out of any analog outputting console. And if you're going to a flat panel and you really want that every little bit of difference, I would pick up a Mister or something because, you could really get dual output from that. But at the same time, anytime you have a signal that starts out as analog and goes to digital, there's always going to be noise when you scale it. Whereas digital to digital, nothing. So just my suggestions. Raw Pixel Subhuman had a pretty interesting hypothetical question. Imagine a terrible world where CRTs no longer exist, and you must go back in time to bring back either one consumer TV or one PVM monitor of your choice to be reverse engineered and mass-produced for historical preservation and the future enjoyment of all mankind. There will be no improvements to the model, and nothing about the model can ever be changed. What make or model do you choose, and why? So here, I have a few answers to this. I can't pick one, but I can describe why, which might be a help for people. So when I'm gaming on a CRT, the reason is, zero lag, authentic experience, and I want to see the mask. Now, the mask is, imagine, the horizontal and vertical black lines. Sometimes they call them scan lines. Scan lines are actually the image being drawn, but semantics aside, I want to be able to see that because without seeing that, I don't feel like I'm gaming on a CRT. And that's the look that creates the look of a CRT. That black space isn't lines. It's you're looking through a piece of glass at the depth of nothing throughout the back of that tube, whereas everything written on the front is being drawn on the back of the glass in front of you. So I would want something where I could see the mask, but just barely. And that's kind of where I'm at now too, because I've always collected different types of CRTs. I was always chasing the highest line count. But when you get something like a 20-inch BVM and you see the different models, the E-Series with 1,000 lines on a 20-inch is so clear that you can't see any of the vertical mask, and it starts to look like a flat panel, which is awesome in the CRT era, but and a lot of people prefer that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just my opinion. So when you back down, then you start getting into like certain model PVMs and stuff like that, where you could see the full mask, but not quite. So like, if you're looking for it, you could see it, but if you're just sitting back and playing it, you get that depth of the image, which is what I'm always chasing, at least nowadays for the past year or so. And then once you start to step down lower than that, now you have a ton of space between the actual image being drawn. And this is most commonly seen if you have a giant CRT with a low line count. So imagine a 36-inch TV with a 250 line count. Like you could stick a pencil in the line between two scan lines of data. So that's not enough. That's way overboard. You would have to be, 15 feet away for it to blend together. So the goal would be something that looks and feels like a CRT so that you could preserve that experience. And I like your there's no improvements to the model allowed, because that kind of makes the question easier to answer. So there's a couple of really awesome 32-inch curved tube TVs that, Sony makes some, JVC makes some, I think Toshiba too, but really high quality. And they have all the inputs: RF, composite, component, S-video. For RGB heads, we could just use the RGB to com from RetroTank. So any one of those, I think if I had to choose one, would probably be it, because they're high line count, curved tube, so it's still that authentic experience. They have all the inputs, so you have one TV that you could just use for everything. If I had to pick a PVM, it would be the 20M2U, because it's got, they were the most affordable of the unaffordable PVMs. They accept anything that you throw at it, pretty much, from sync types to all that stuff. They're really clear and they're really durable. So they're not as sharp and everything else as like the M4 and the M2U, the ones that accept 480p and all that stuff. I don't know why I'm just dropping 20L5. Sorry. They're not as sharp as like a 20L5 or something like that. And they don't accept 480p, but it's still good overall. And then, I would also have to mention the D32, because it's 16:9. It accepts all resolutions. It's a super high line count. But that would be something for enthusiasts or for historical purposes. I don't think your average person would have ever seen something like that in the 90s or early 2000s. And it's more probable that you went from a 4x3 480i CRT straight to a flat panel, probably, depending on how much of an early adopter you were, maybe a 720p flat panel, maybe even a 480p if you were the earlier plasma days. But I think most people took that jump. So if I had to pick one, it would be just pick whatever the highest line count 32-inch consumer grade TV with all the inputs and a curved screen. There's quite a few that have them. If I had to pick two, I would pick that and the 20M2U. And if it was three, it would definitely be the BVM32, just because you get everything with that. So excellent question. I hope I answered it the way that you'd hoped, but I guess why I answered it that way is certainly, to me at least, more important. And a lot of people seem to care a lot about 480p, but to be honest, that's really hit or miss. Some movies I've talked about this before, do really look better in 480p on a CRT, because the mask, the lines, cut through a lot of film noise and stuff like that. But a lot of TV shows just look good either in 480i on a CRT or with whatever deinterlacer you have on a flat panel. So the 480p thing is less important to me than everything else. But yeah, it was a fun question to answer. Another quick one from Raw Pixel Subhuman. They were curious if I've ever tested a ShinyBo SB3729 component splitter, or if I know if they're decent. I have not, but I have used ShinyBo stuff in the past that was all very good quality. So if you're looking for a component splitter, that's probably a good solution. The only other things you could do is try to find older used equipment. I think Audio Authority made some okay stuff. You could, of course, get a G-Comp switch or an Extron Crosspoint switch, but if all you need is a component splitter, I would just try that out, and you should be fine. Conrad Klaus says, "Hey Bob, a few times you've talked about the algorithm, and I wanted to know what we could do to help." Thanks, it's very nice of you. Should we all be commenting on your videos besides liking them to boost? It's my strong opinion that do whatever. Like I'm just very happy that people enjoy the content, and I'm of course especially appreciative when people support. But I wouldn't go out of your way to do anything. As everybody says that you're supposed to hit the like button, or I guess even the dislike button, because apparently any engagement boosts the algorithm. But I watch 90% of my content on Apple TV on my television, and I don't know, I still haven't figured out how to like it. There used to be a button, then it moved. So, don't go out of your way to do anything other than enjoy the content and, and just do whatever's easiest for you. But I do really appreciate the question. As far as to continue Conrad's post, as for where videos go, do what you have to do. I'd say they probably should go off the channel to a backup channel, but in my perfect world, the long videos and roundups would be together. That's how I figured, that's how I found you to begin with. To think 4.5 years ago, I was like, oh man, playing SNES again would be great. And it coincided with finding the webpage and videos. And then you fell down the rabbit hole. Thank you very much. And then you followed up with, and can't wait can't wait for some guitar content. I'm a guitar player too. Awesome, fellow guitar player. So here's where I'm at with all of this, because I'm always open and honest to the point where people are bored and don't want to hear it anymore. But after talking to people who are more in tune with the algorithm, there's a few choices I could make, but I don't want to make a choice today that I'm going to regret 6 months from now. And I don't want to make many choices and changes, because I think we could all agree that the only thing that everybody would unanimously hate is if I changed 5 times in 3 months how I'm doing things. So where I'm at now is, do I make a second channel called RetroRGB Weeklies and put the weekly roundup and put the Q&A on there? Or do I just, I have an RG Bob channel that I have. Do I just put the Q&As on there with a bunch of, with any time I do a personal video, or anytime I do a video that's like, like the little 3-minute example of the mega color video player on a Genesis, stuff like that's bad for the algorithm, but people would enjoy that. So do I throw that on the RG Bob channel and then just embed the video in the post for anybody that sees it and cares, type of thing? So, that's kind of where I'm at now. Somebody even suggested, no, do 3 channels. Do, RetroRGB is the high production videos and interviews and stuff, and then RetroRGB Weekly, and then RetroRGB Extras. And I think that's just kind of pushing it. I think I would prefer 2 channels, and I think I'm leaning towards everything is exactly the same, the exact way it is right now, except there's, a second personal channel for just whatever crap that I have, including an audio podcast. So you'd be able to get these Q&As on iTunes and, and Google Play and I think even all of them. Let's just say all of them. There was a couple of big ones on there, but so I think that's what I'm leaning towards now, is just everything is exactly the way it is, but people would only have to subscribe 1 more, and I'd put it on a personal channel, and I don't care about the algorithm at all. I might even just, turn off comments or something just to keep it off the algorithm, just to have a fun personal channel where I could just, I guess I would leave the comments on, because I was about to say interact with friends type of thing, but, basically just don't worry about it. Put the Q&As up, put content that I feel like putting up, like even the MSU audio for the Game Boy example. I left that unlisted because I didn't want to mess with the algorithm, but it got a ton of views based on how many people clicked on the post. So stuff like that, fun, weird stuff that's not a total fit for RetroRGB, or stuff that is a total fit but would hurt the algorithms, probably would do that. So any thoughts, I'm all ears. The only thing I don't want to do is piss everybody off. So I think I'm leaning towards 2 channels, and I think I'm leaning towards just RetroRGB as is and RG Bob, but RetroRGB Weeklies might be better, because even the weekly podcasts don't get as much or as many hits as the bigger videos, because I think more than half the people that listen to those listen audio only, which is totally cool. I don't care about any of that stuff. As long as you're enjoying it, I'm happy, but that does affect the YouTube algorithm, and I have to play by their rules. So any thoughts on that? I think I'm going to leave this week's just kind of the way it is and go from there, but I'm all ears if anybody has suggestions. Scott Duncan had a very nice comment. Longtime watcher, I appreciate what you do for the community with dozens of consoles, mods, ODEs, and EverDrives. It's nice having someone like you filter out all the updates and happenings in the scene. Thank you very much, Scott. It's very nice of you. I've had a bunch of people over the years tell me, say things similar to yours and say the opposite, in that I don't really like you or your videos, but the roundup is super helpful, so I listen every week. You know what? As long as you're enjoying, I'm happy. That's the goal of this stuff is, if you like the extra stuff, cool, but the weekly roundups were always just meant to make sure everybody's always kept in the loop, and I don't think that's ever going to stop. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe I'll, become an astronaut or something and not have time to do it takes 40 hours to make a video type of thing, but I don't think their weekly roundups will ever stop because I enjoy doing them, and it is a big help for people. And just being in the position I'm in that I know a whole bunch of people in the scene, it's very easy for me to know what's coming and prepare a post and all that stuff. So thanks for the kind words. DW623 said they just moved into a new house where they have a lot more space for setting up a game room. They have an Ultra HDMI modded N64, and it still has the standard AV port, and they want to put a flat screen HD TV next to a CRT TV with the modded N64 running HDMI to the flat panel and simultaneously run S-Video to a consumer TV. If I run output to both TVs, will that do anything like draw too much power from the N64 and potentially damage it long term? Excellent question. Great news. No problem whatsoever. The Ultra HDMI takes the digital signals, so you're not doing a double draw on the analog. You could even, depending on the model of your N64, if you wanted to RGB mod it, I don't think that's necessary at all. I think CRT or S-Video on a CRT is going to be a big difference. And just to be clear, because a lot of people were still confused by this, my comments about the Rad2X were when you take N64's smooth graphics anyway and put them and convert them to 480p and then put that 480p signal on your average run-of-the-mill 4K TV, you're not going to tell the difference 99% of the time between composite and S-Video. But in your scenario, going to a CRT TV, you're not scaling anything, you will notice a difference between composite and S-Video, and I think it's worth spending just a little bit extra money on the S-Video cable. So what you just described sounds like a really awesome setup. Bad Reality wants to know if the Sega Game Gear consolizer contains a chip that will enable the widescreen version of Game Gear ROMs from a ROM cart. So depends what you mean by widescreen version. So Game Gear games only display part of the resolution that a Game Gear can actually display. So a Game Gear is essentially a portable Master System, but it runs at a lesser resolution. So a lot of the Game Gear to Master System hacks, the first thing they have to do is change the color palette so it's compatible. Then they have to, they try to remap the buttons for start versus pause. And then also, a lot of them move the information around on the screen. So there's like the HUDs get moved up to take more advantage of that. And some games display pretty fine with that extra area, but other games like Mega Man were designed specifically for the Game Gear, so there's nothing in that extra area at all. So it's not like you're opening up the curtains to see a bigger picture. You're seeing noise. It's very distracting. It's not a good way to play the games at all. So if that's what you're talking about, that extra unused area, then no, both because that's more of an emulation thing to do, and also because in most cases, it's going to be a terrible experience. You're just going to have flashing and characters and doubling and ghosting. And if you're talking about something else, though, please let me know. Maybe I'm just forgetting about something else, but I think that's what you're talking about is the unused area. And I could ask Woozle, but if I were him, I would definitely not do it because it would just annoy people more than anything. And if you want to see an example, I think some emulators have the option to just show the unused space. So you could see for yourself what I'm talking about. Definitely try Mega Man so you could understand how distracting it would be to the point where it would take away from the experience. David Sobel wants to know if I have any solutions for USB power for retro consoles. They're always looking for ways to free up outlets, and I'm specifically wondering about something like a Genesis or SNES. So, I don't I think what you're talking about is a DC power solution. So you have one AC into the wall, and you have a DC splitter, and then you just plug all of your consoles into that. I have had nightmarishly bad experiences with those in the music world. I've tried cheapy ones. I've tried, $200 DC distribution amps. And I was just messaging with somebody else about this the other day. Like, it gives me nightmares sometimes when I think about it. Just being up on stage, and every time I stop playing, all you hear is coming through the speakers. So I'd have to, even with a volume pedal, I'd have to put a volume pedal at the end of the chain because all of the bad things were still humming through it. And it still kind of hummed through that last thing. So no, I don't know of any. You could try to do something like take one of the Triad power supplies, and then make your own distribution amp, and not distribution amp, but like a block terminal. And as long as only one console was powered on at a time, it should be okay. But now you're still connecting ground to each of the consoles at the same time. I just, I'm sure it could be done. I'm sure people have done it. It makes me nervous, and I don't think you're going to I think it's going to be more of a headache than anything else. But if you like tinkering, by all means, try it. Just understand that you might end up spending a lot of time on something that you end up disassembling anyway. So I would just get some of those power adapters where everything's spaced out, and kind of go from there, and stick with good power supplies too. Don't try to get any of those like $5 generic ones. If you need aftermarket, get those Triads that are linked on the Firebrand X page, and just get the right adapters for it. So the next question is from Dave Sobel, and the last question was from David Sobel. So there's either two people here with the same name, or y'all have an alter ego or something. It's just interesting to see one right after the other. But anyway, question is, I have the Game Boy Advance consolizer going into a 2018 TCL TV. Neither of the two audio options from the consolizer are providing audio, and I verified to a smaller, different panel that the audio does work. What are my options for this TV? Oh, hey, I don't read these questions at all before I do it because I like to have a natural response. And the end of this post is, and Small World, clearly two David Sobels are fans of your stuff. That's funny. I swear I didn't see that beforehand. That is, now I kind of feel silly, and I'm smiling about it. Well, to your actual question, Dave, your options are to take the audio from the headphone jack and then use some kind of device that combines audio. Some TVs, I can't remember if that model TCL does, will allow an analog audio input to be mapped to an HDMI port. So you could definitely look into that. You would just need like a 3.5 millimeter to RCA cable, plug it in, and then just route it that way. I'm positive I've done that on a TCL TV before. I just don't remember what model or anything like that. Other options is you could try a splitter. It's possible that the splitter might change the audio in a way that that is compatible with it. You could try running it through a FrameMeister if you already have one. I would not recommend going out and buying a FrameMeister at all these days just because of cost, but certainly not for this. But if you already have it for something else, you could try running it through that. I wouldn't do those SCART to HDMI boxes because even the HDMI pass-through has variable and random lag. So that while that would probably fix it, it's not what you're looking for. If you have an AVR, a receiver with HDMI inputs, you could try that to see if that would work. I think that's pretty much it for the choices, though. I think on that TV, you should just be able to run the analog audio into the analog RCA jacks and route it through. So start with there and let me know if you need anything else, or if any of those other options work. Jason Guffey says they got an original Xbox running Rocky 5's soft mod and finally managed to do the hard drive upgrade via hot swapping. The plan was to back up the games to a bigger, more modern hard drive, and if the event that my 20-year-old disk drive should fail, and finally found a compatible drive and got it in there. Now the problem is that when everything is back together, the disk doesn't work. I feel like I'm in a time travel plotline where I caused the very thing I try to prevent. Anyway, I've tried spraying out the disk drive with air, wiping the lens, and just checking all my plugs. Any more suggestions? Would a replacement lens be a good idea? I don't get errors or anything. The thing just freezes up on me when I try to copy games, even though I can hear it spinning. So check your IDE cable. So Todd from Todd's Nerd Cave was nice enough to do a very awesome and detailed post on RetroRGB about testing speeds on SSDs, SD cards, and the IDE cable. And what he found was that just using the hard drive, 40 pin versus 80 pin didn't make a difference. However, if I'm remembering correctly, and this is 20 years ago, so when you use IDE cables like that, if you're using both drives that are connected to it at the same time, then the 80 pin really will be a help. So it's possible your cable got crimped. I don't think it's a speed issue, but maybe you would get a speed boost anyway going to an 80 pin cable from copying from disk drive to that. So I would start with that because it's cheap. Check that post on the website. Just check RetroRGB for Xbox. It's one of the only things up there. Get the IDE cable that Todd linked to, and start with that because it's cheap. And even if it doesn't fix it, you might possibly get a speed boost when ripping from disk to hard drive. At that point, after that, it could have just been coincidence. Your drive could have been dying anyway. Then you took the whole console apart, you put it back together, and you rattled the drive just a little bit, whereas that thing might have been stationary for 20 years. And maybe that was it. So I would just start looking for replacement drives, and you got to make sure you get the right drive, or you could flash aftermarket drives with different firmware. I remember doing all that stuff when it came out, but I'm definitely no longer an Xbox modding expert. I was at one point. I could confidently answer a lot of these questions, but I would just start with the IDE cable because it's so cheap and it might give you a boost anyway, and then kind of go down and check out some of the Xbox websites and see what other people suggest from there on. Demon Boy Jr. is having an issue with their Dreamcast. The audio and video stops working about 10 seconds after turning it on. They said it happens whether they use RGB or HDMI. Google makes them think it's the power supply, but even after the video and audio cuts out, the orange power light stays on. They have the 12-volt regulator removed since I use a GDMU, but others do this as well, so I'm not sure this is the issue. Here's a video to better show what's happening. So let's fire that up real quick, because I have a similar issue that I'm about to troubleshoot as well. So for anybody listening audio only, you get the Dreamcast splash screen. It's not going to GDMU, it's going directly to the main BIOS screen where you see like play, file, you could change the settings and all of that. And then it just goes off. But the light stays on the Dreamcast. So the issue that I'm having, I could actually get to the GDMU menu, and sometimes I could even launch a game, but it resets. It doesn't power off, it resets itself. So I haven't had time to troubleshoot mine yet. Demon Boy Jr. wanted to add that in the video they had both RGB and HDMI going, but it happens even when using one at a time. So my gut, now this could be totally wrong. This is just a wild guess. My gut is it's the ghetto knockoff GDMU that I bought. This is the only time in the history of RetroRGB I have ever not endorsed but purchased a clone product that wasn't for testing. I bought a bunch to say, look, this is why you don't buy the clones, but I could never get one. I don't want to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and then deal with a potentially hostile seller. I just wanted to press a button and order one, and you can get them from Amazon Prime. But I know that when you buy clones and knockoffs, you're buying mostly garbage. There are some companies that make nice clones. I still don't want those anyway. So my gut is telling me that if you have a non-official GDMU, that's probably it. I haven't had time to test mine. I'm using that to do a mode video pretty soon, so I should test it within a week or two. But a power supply could still be the issue because you would still be getting power running to the LED at least. It just wouldn't have enough power. Like if the capacitors and the power supply were dying, it might not be able to hold enough charge to power the board and all the peripherals, but it would have enough just to power the LED. So, if you're in a rush to do this, I would take out the GDMU and put back in your CD drive. And if you don't have it, just take out the GDMU and see if it still boots and see how long it stays on. And that's like that's free for troubleshooting. If it still does the same thing, my next suggestion would be to replace the capacitors and the power supply exactly like Voltar just did in his video. And if you saw in his video, there were a few capacitors that looked fine, but when you took them out, you saw that they had just started to leak. So that could be it. You could have popped the top off your Dreamcast and gone, oh, this looks fine. It's probably not the power supply, but it could actually still be leaking. So I would first try the GDEMU just because it's so easy to pop that thing out and see if it still works. Then I would try recapping the power supply, and if it still doesn't work, it could be a lot of things. It could be the DC HDMI installation. Mine was done by Dan, so I'm pretty sure that's not the problem with mine. Yeah, I think that you'd have to start with those two. And look, here's the good and the bad. If it turns out that your power supply never needed to be recapped at all, it would have at some point. Without a shadow of a doubt, between now and never, you would absolutely have had to have recapped that power supply. So getting some really high quality caps from the Console 5 kits, it's you might not have ended up having to do that, but there's no bad could come of it. Try not to damage it, even if you did damage the power supply. Who knows? What if it's already broken? So I would definitely start with the GDEMU and see if that's the issue. Then try recapping the power supply, and if that still doesn't help, hey, save it. Now you have a recapped power supply that you could use. And of course, I'll keep everybody updated. I'll mention it in the mode review too, because it's something that's. I really do think it's the GDEMU, and it really is a reason to not buy knockoff crappy products. And with the mode being pretty much readily available, it still would be a good option if you plan on using large drives. So like a friend of mine just got a huge hard drive to use, and it's way cheaper than buying even an official or knockoff GDEMU and a really big SD card. It's actually cheaper to buy the mode and the big SSD versus that. So depending on your situation, I'm just happy that there's stuff that's available to purchase now that's not knockoffs. So we'll see. Heck, maybe I'll even throw the mode in there too to see if that affects anything. But I don't know. I go off topic. Hopefully I gave you enough advice to get you started on that one. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much for everybody that participates in these. I really enjoy it. And if you're new to this, feel free to ask absolutely any question you want. As you could hear, we already talked about beer and whiskey today, as well as nerd stuff that I also love talking about. Just wherever you ask, please make sure you ask in the newest Q&A post, wherever it is that you support. I don't really check the comments on YouTube. Respectfully, I check all the comments on all the other videos. This is just something that is really a thank you to everybody that supports and is a part of the interaction that I enjoy having with all the supporters. So wherever you are, wherever you support, I check them every week, every service. Just post your question and I will get to it. And the way these support services work, you can't tell what's new or old from other posts, so you got to make sure to put it in the newest post. And if for whatever reason I miss, which just happened a couple of weeks ago, it's never intentional. So if something happens, it's either the video got deleted in post or maybe it came in after I started doing the Q&As. So please just re-ask the question for the next week and I'll get to it. And as we talked about before, if your questions aren't showing up, if your responses and comments, please contact Patreon, because I am so sorry about that. I have never censored any posts at all or flagged as spam. This was definitely a misunderstanding, and probably just Patreon was broken for a little while. So sorry about all that. Anyway, thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week.